Welcome back to another episode of the Jacob Johnston Show. Yes, I know it's been a little while since I've gone off and I produced an episode, at least a video episode, but I wasn't here all last week and I was out traveling and, visiting family, and I forgot to pack my microphone, so I wasn't able to record or produce any episodes, not even audio episodes. I can't believe I did that. I had the microphone ready to go, ready to be packed up, and I forgot it. Oh, so that one's on me. Okay, so let's dive right on into this because I missed a lot last week and I won't be able to recap everything, but I will be able to go off and touch on some of the big highlights. So, as you know, Joe Biden went out there and he gave his first primetime address to the nation, and he spit out more lies in 20 minutes than what Donald Trump did in 4 years. It's unbelievable. I mean, the guy lives nowhere near reality. And of course, the media's there to try and sell the lie. I mean, that's the whole thing about the entire left. All the Democrats running for office, they lie about their lies, and then they lie some more. And then the media and the fact checkers, instead of going out there and informing you and talking about the truth, only exist now to sell the lies of the Democrat Party, even though they are verifiable lies, even though they are proven lies. The fact checkers will still try and claim what the Democrats say are true and what Republicans say are false. I mean, there's nothing faker than a fact checker on Facebook. All right, so he goes out there and he gives his address, and there was one part of the speech, one part that really stood out to me. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
A year ago, we were hit with a virus that was met with silence and spread unchecked. Denials for days, weeks, then months. That led to more deaths, more infections, more stress, and more loneliness.
Now that statement is a lie, at least a half lie, right? Him going out there and trying to say it was met with silence for days, weeks, and months. But met with silence by who exactly? Not by President Trump. President Trump was the first one in DC, I believe, to talk about the coronavirus, to warn about the dangers of the coronavirus. He talked about it in his State of the Union address back in 2020. He already went off and started engaging in travel restrictions, put together a coronavirus task force, was going out there talking about the need for social distancing and not traveling much. President Trump wasn't silent on the coronavirus when it first broke out, but the Democrats, on the other hand, the Democrats were calling it hysterical overreaction, xenophobic, and telling everybody ignore the warnings about the coronavirus and just go out, travel, get together in large masses, and celebrate with your friends and family. So Joe Biden's out there trying to act like he's a leader on the coronavirus when the only one who was leading the way was President Trump. The Democrats actually obstructed the efforts in the beginning to contain the coronavirus. They obstructed the efforts to try and, solve the problem before it spread too far. It was the Democrats that encouraged all the actions that resulted in this spreading like wildfire. They were the ones that shoved COVID patients into nursing homes, ignoring the science, and resulting in thousands of grandmas and grandpas being killed as a result. Yes, it was the Democrats. You could pretty much say that most of the deaths from the coronavirus, if it was the responsibility of anybody outside of China, would be that of the Democrats. They were the ones that obstructed all efforts to get it under containment when it first broke out. And yet, even though they're the ones that engaged in the actions to spread this as far and wide as possible, ignored the science resulting in deaths in nursing homes across the country, they're the ones that ignored all the science. And now they're coming out there rewriting history, acting like they were the leaders of the coronavirus. They took it seriously and that they will be able to solve the problem. But thanks to President Trump's leadership, the problem was pretty much already solved before Joe Biden ever stepped foot into office. It was pretty much already solved before the election occurred because Trump took quick action, did everything he could to slow the spread despite the Democrats' efforts to make sure it spreads as far and wide as possible. His Operation Warp Speed led to the development of multiple vaccines, and he ordered over 100 million doses. He put in the distribution plan to ensure that everybody who wanted it to be inoculated and get the vaccine would by April or May. All of that was put into place before Joe Biden would ever step foot in the White House. So while Joe Biden was the one who was silent on the coronavirus when it first broke out, told people to ignore all of the warnings and all of the safety guidelines, is out there now trying to take credit for what President Trump did and trying to blame President Trump or claim that President Trump did what Joe Biden and the Democrats did. It's amazing. They do this all the time. They take credit for all of the Republican accomplishments, and then they blame the Republicans for all the ills of the Democrat Party. They do this all the time. And of course, the fake news media, CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, and the fake fact checkers are out there trying to sell you the lie of the Democrat Party. Unbelievable how they get away with this. But now, now that we got the vaccine, people are getting it, and we are at the very tail end of the virus. The Democrats don't want to give it up. They do not want to give up all that power they were able to seize using the coronavirus as an excuse. So even though we have the vaccine, even though we now know a lot about the coronavirus, how 99.5% of us, won't suffer any real ill effects, we'll just have a few crappy days. They don't want to give up the power. They want to be able to keep all of that massive control. So even with the virus, they're going out there and trying to say, no, you can't go back to a normal life. You can't go back to socializing like you used to. Oh, no. We're still going to have to stay locked down for quite some time. And that you will need permission from the government, even on the 4th of July, in order to gather in large numbers. So here's the fraud, Dr. Fauci, going off and trying to sell that even though we have a vaccine and we're at the tail end of this, that we're not going to be able to gather in large numbers. I mean, Dr. Fauci, he is a fraud. He has been wrong every step of the way. And one of the best things President Trump did was boot Dr. Fauci out. I mean, here is a political hack trying to act like a doctor.
Let me ask you about that, because Biden said there's a good chance Americans will be able to gather in backyards and neighborhoods for cookouts on the 4th. The CDC already has guidelines for gathering outside with masks and distancing. So can you explain the difference? Does that mean people will be able to return to a sense of normalcy without masks, without distancing on the 4th of July?
Well, yes. First of all, to be a greater degree of confidence. When you have a situation where you have 70,000 infections per day, I mean, that is a feeling that you don't feel very secure about mingling, about having people around, feeling comfortable about it. If by the time we get to the 4th of July, with the rollout of the vaccines, we get the level of infection so low, I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly what the specific guidelines of the CDC are, but I can tell you for sure they will be much more liberal than they are right now about what you can do.
The CDC finally released some guidelines for people who have been fully vaccinated. But those people are still not allowed to have medium-sized gatherings. They're still not allowed to travel, according to the CDC. Why? What do you as a health expert need to see to say it's okay for vaccinated individuals to travel or to be in a crowd? I mean, it doesn't make sense to a lot of people.
So Jake Tapper, who sometimes accidentally acts like a journalist, makes a good point. Hey, this doesn't make sense. Why is it that once we have the vaccination, you're still saying we need to continue social distancing, can't gather in large numbers, can't travel freely? Why is that? And that is a good question. Well, the simple answer is the Democrats don't want to give up the control that they were able to seize selling the lie of the coronavirus. Even though they were the ones that denied the coronavirus in the beginning, denied the dangers. I mean, we've played the clips a bazillion times now of all the Democrats saying, oh, ignore Trump. Oh, Trump's over-exaggerating. Oh, he's just being xenophobic. Don't worry about the coronavirus. It is nothing worse than the cold. We've seen those clips of the Democrats saying that. You know, everyone from Governor Cuomo to Mayor Bill de Blasio to Gavin Newsom to Nancy Pelosi, all of them. We saw them all downplay it and telling people to ignore all the warnings. And then they come out and they say, yes, you know, this is dangerous. And then they tried to blame President Trump, who was the only one who took action in the beginning when it first broke out. The only one to recognize the dangers in D.C. Now, since they were able to rewrite the history of it, they've been able to seize a lot of power, take away a lot of rights, suspend parts of the Constitution, and manage to get Joe Biden into office by basically violating every election laws, but justifying it by saying the coronavirus. You know, that was the justification for the illegal and unconstitutionally conducted election in many of the swing states that were operated in violation of the laws. So they don't want to give up the power that they've been able to seize thanks to the coronavirus. So yes, they're going to go off there and try and sell that, no. Life will never be able to get back to normal. It will be safer. We'll be able to start going into small gatherings. See, they don't want large gatherings of people. They don't want us to be able to communicate and share ideas anymore. They want to restrict us to where we have to use social media for all of our communications so that they can censor and control what it is we say. And that way, they can go off and tell us what we have to think and believe. And it's amazing. This is completely George Orwell's 1984. You know, they lie, they rewrite history every single day to meet the convenience of what it is they're selling at the moment. And the media, I mean, if you have any faith in what's labeled the mainstream media, CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, all of that, you are a moron at this point. If you have any belief in them, if you still believe that the fact checkers have any credibility, you are a moron who hasn't been paying attention. And of course, they've been able to use the coronavirus in order to pass the $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. Well, what they're calling a stimulus bill. And they're saying it's a bailout for the American people. No, it's not. Hardly anything about the so-called COVID relief bill has anything to do with COVID. It is just basically robbing the public treasury in order to pay off Democrat donors who are going to take a large portion of that fund and put it back in the hands of the politicians as campaign donations. It's just basically they use COVID as a justification for raiding the treasury and laundering the money back into their campaigns, so that you and I, the taxpayers, are paying for the Democrats running for office to take away our rights. And yet the media is out there, along with the Democrats, trying to claim that this is for the people. Yeah, right. I got a bridge to sell you in New York if you believe that this COVID package is for the people. They gave you crumbs so that they can make you believe that this bill was about you, when really it was about the donors and bailing out Democrat states that were failing under the weight of Democrat policies so that you and I, who live in red states, who voted for responsible politicians, who were competent in their jobs, now got to pay for and bail out all the blue states who vote for idiots in office, who are irresponsible with public funds and violate their fiduciary responsibility, and we're on the verge of collapse. But now we bailed them out so that they can go on for a few more years before they collapse. But of course, when a few more years down the road, they'll come up with another excuse as to why we need to bail them out. Because their policies suck. They're unsustainable. They will always collapse like Venezuela. And eventually, the federal government is not going to be able to bail them out. They know this, so they're just stalling for time. But here we go with the media trying to sell you on the idea that the coronavirus bill was about you.
And welcome to Face the Nation. President Biden's American Rescue Plan has been signed into law, and it is one of the largest stimulus bills in American history. Its impact, particularly on low-income Americans, could be significant. Traditional political party lines could also be altered. Make no mistake, Democrats support and Republicans oppose the overall package, but some provisions in the new law are longtime priorities of conservatives.
Unemployment programs will extend into September and add up to an extra $300 a week in benefits. Multi-billion-dollar hikes in housing aid, food stamps, and Obamacare subsidies. $50 billion for small business relief. And $350 billion in aid to state and local governments, radioactive to many conservatives as a bailout for Blue America. Despite broad public support, not one Republican in Congress voted for the package.
Now, they went off there and they claimed that it had a lot of longtime priorities for the Republicans, but I didn't see a single thing that they listed as a priority of the Republicans. Now, look, as far as it goes when it comes to the stimulus, giving direct payments to the people. Look, if the government shut down the economy, blocked you from being able to work, blocked you from being able to earn a living, yes, they do need to compensate you for that. We can consider that like eminent domain. But that wasn't $1.9 trillion that they were spending on you. Like I said, they gave you crumbs and spent most of it on their donors and bailing out blue states that were on the verge of collapsing under the weight of their own policies. That were on the verge of collapsing even before the coronavirus hit. Trying to bail them out of policies that they implemented before the coronavirus. So it's just basically they tried to sell it as coronavirus relief, when really they're just robbing the public treasury. You know what would have been better? If instead of giving you crumbs and paying off all their donors and bailing out all the failing blue states, what if they spent the entire $1.9 trillion on direct payments to you? Do you know how much money that would have been? It would have been far more than $1,400 a person. Oh yes, they would have been able to give you a much bigger check, but instead they gave you crumbs, spent it all on their donors, who they know are going to funnel a large portion of it back into their campaigns, and told you, this is great for you. Even though $1,400, woo, when we take a look at how much money they've spent on stimulus versus how much money you could have made if they didn't shut down the government, you would have made a lot more money being able to go into work. I mean, if you add up all the money that you received as direct payment as a result of, these stimulus packages, the two under Trump and the one under the Democrats, it barely provides anything. It doesn't change anything. You might have gotten, 6 weeks worth of income out of all of that? So no, I mean, they're just going off, and yet they're trying to claim that they are so compassionate. They're full of crap is what they are. Unbelievable that they get away with this. And of course, yes, it was passed on a partisan line. No, I don't believe any Republicans voted for it. And why did the Democrats just ram it through? Well, because they know that you know the truth about what happened in the election, and they're trying to buy you off. Of course, doing so, they're basically collapsing the country. I mean, sure, you might be able to get away with this for a little bit, but we are well on our way to becoming Venezuela. But, you're not supposed to know about that. You're not supposed to think about that. You're supposed to be greedy. But the Democrats thought they could get away with this. And now they're going off and saying, yes, we're just going to pass everything on partisan votes. We're not going to go off and get any bipartisan agreement on anything, and they don't care. They don't care. They're going to go through with Kamala Harris, the illegitimate fraud, going off and casting the tie-breaking vote on everything. The Democrats' tyranny, anti-democracy, authoritarian nature, well, they're justifying it, of course, by claiming the GOP is illegitimate. Unbelievable. Take a look at this. From Breitbart News. Brooks, belief GOP illegitimate, so compromise isn't worth it, is guiding force for Democrats? And in the piece it says, Brooks stated that he thinks there is a possibility of bipartisan compromise. But the question to me is, Democrats, do they really want to? They hold the power here. Do they really want to? Or do they regard the current Republican Party as so illegitimate it is not worth compromising? And I think that sentiment is really the guiding force within the Democrat Party right now. How should I say this? There's an old adage here about those who live in glass houses not casting stones. Just a thought here. So the Democrats, who have no room to be speaking about people being illegitimate in office, are going out there and now trying to justify their partisanship based off of the claims that the GOP is illegitimate. It's once again the Democrats casting the ills of the Democrat Party and projecting them onto the Republicans. Unbelievable. Unbelievable that they tried to do this. The Democrats' entire hold on power is based off of fraud, is based off of illegitimacy. From what happened that put Joe Biden in the White House, that we're not allowed to talk about or will be censored. For the portion of this video that will go up on YouTube. Now on Rumble, sure, I can talk about it. But on YouTube, they're going to censor the heck out of any talks about the truth of the November elections and Joe Biden as president. The entire hold on the House is based off of stripping you and me of representation and giving it to illegal immigrants who, since they can't vote, result in having blue states having more representation per citizen than red states. And of course, we know that is because of the illegitimacy of the White House that they have the illegitimate control over the Senate. Unbelievable. The Democrats, whose entire claim to power is based off of fraud and illegitimacy, is going out there claiming that they're just going to ram everything through because they have all the power and they believe the other side is illegitimate. You just want to rip your hair out. How do these frauds get away with it? And more importantly, how is it that the Republicans allow such fraud, allow these tyrants to fraudulently steal their way into office, no matter how much it's proven? And yet they're going to go off and try and claim they're the legitimate ones and the Republicans are the illegitimate ones, despite all the evidence that the reverse is true. So we know that the Democrats are going to continue to use the coronavirus and that there is no stopping their authoritarian nature. All right. So what I think I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and end the video portion of the show. If you want to catch the rest of this show, go ahead and search The Jacob Johnston Show wherever it is you listen to podcasts and follow the podcast there. You know, whether that be in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, not SoundCloud, I believe, but also on Spotify. You know, go ahead, search anywhere where you get your podcast in order to listen to the rest of the show. All right, so for all you video watchers, thank you for tuning in. I'll be back again soon. And now let's go ahead and get into the audio only portion of the show.